In our quaint little neighborhood, nestled between towering trees and well-kept lawns, life seemed to flow smoothly until you crossed paths with the HOA. The Homeowners Association, intended to maintain order and harmony, often felt more like a governing body than a group of concerned neighbors. They enforced rules about everything: lawn height, paint colors, and even the types of flowers allowed in front yards. While most residents appreciated the effort to keep the community looking pristine, there was one figure who took it to an extreme: Karen. Karen was the self-appointed enforcer of HOA regulations, wielding her clipboard like a badge of honor. With her sharp gaze and ready complaints, she made it her mission to ensure that everyone adhered strictly to the rules, often forgetting that not everyone shared her fervor for conformity. She had a reputation for storming into neighbors' yards uninvited, ready to point out every minor transgression. While some residents feared her wrath, others found humor in her antics. It created a unique dynamic. Neighbors would whisper about Karen's latest crusade over backyard barbecues or poolside gatherings, bonding over their collective exasperation. Yet, there was an unspoken understanding that while Karen thrived on control, one thing remained sacred: the private lake at the end of the street, an oasis meant for relaxation and enjoyment. Or so we thought, until Karen decided to host a swimming party there, crossing an invisible line that would set off a chain reaction of events no one could have predicted. The private lake at the end of our street was more than just a body of water. It was a cherished slice of paradise, a gathering place for residents seeking solace from their busy lives. Years ago, when the neighborhood was first developed, the lake was designed to be a communal escape. Families would fish, children would play, and friends would gather for picnics on its banks. It had become a symbol of our close-knit community, a place where memories were made and laughter echoed. However, with the rise of the HOA and Karen's vigilant oversight, the lake's atmosphere began to change. The HOA established strict rules around its use: no swimming, no loud music, and even designated hours for fishing. While some regulations were necessary for safety and maintenance, they also stifled the lake's spirit. In many ways, it felt like an attempt to control what had once been a free and joyful space. As the narrator, I always held a deep sense of ownership over that lake. It was my retreat, my sanctuary where I could escape the pressures of everyday life. I believed that the lake belonged to all of us, yet Karen and the HOA seemed to view it as another opportunity for regulation. This clash between my desire for freedom and their need for control created an underlying tension that simmered just below the surface, ultimately leading to Karen's ill-fated swimming party that would trigger my unexpected retaliation. It all began with a casual afternoon stroll to the lake, where I often found peace among the gentle lapping of the water and the rustling of leaves. That day, as I approached my sanctuary, I noticed an unusual sight: Karen's unmistakable car parked near the water's edge, a flurry of colorful decorations spilling out of her trunk. My heart sank. Karen had taken it upon herself to organize a swimming party at the lake, completely disregarding the established rules that prohibited swimming. It was as if she believed her enthusiasm could simply override the community's guidelines. I could hardly believe my eyes as she set up a large inflatable pool and strung up lights, her laughter ringing out as she rallied a small crowd of unsuspecting neighbors who seemed oblivious to her blatant rule-breaking. Frustration boiled within me. How could she be so selfish? Didn't she understand that this wasn't just about her? The lake was meant for everyone, and here she was treating it like her personal playground. I felt a wave of indignation wash over me as I watched her direct guests to dive into the water without a care in the world. The very essence of what made our neighborhood special, the shared respect for each other's spaces, was crumbling before my eyes. As I stood there, torn between disbelief and anger, I knew this couldn't go unanswered. Karen's party was more than just an infraction. It was a challenge to everything I held dear about our community. Little did she know, this would spark my creative retaliation, igniting a chaotic turn of events that would soon change everything. As I stood on the shore, watching Karen revel in her party, a storm brewed inside me. Helplessness and anger twisted together, creating a knot in my stomach. The sight of her carefree laughter as she splashed with friends felt like a personal affront, a blatant disregard for the rules that had been put in place to protect our community's harmony. How could she flaunt those boundaries so easily? It was infuriating. I thought back to all the times I had followed the HOA's regulations, respected the shared spaces, and kept my own celebrations within the confines of what was deemed acceptable. Yet here was Karen, acting as if she were above the very rules she enforced on others. With each laugh that echoed across the lake, my frustration deepened. I felt a surge of determination. I had to do something, anything, to make her understand that her actions had consequences. That's when an idea struck me, both mischievous and deliciously satisfying. What if I retaliated in a way that would not only get her attention but also teach her a lesson about respecting others' boundaries? The thought of unleashing the resident geese, a gaggle known for their chaotic energy and honking protests, made me chuckle despite my anger. They could wreak havoc at her party and serve as a perfect reminder of the wild spirit of our community. In that moment, I felt empowered. My feelings of helplessness began to transform into a sense of purpose. This wouldn't just be revenge. It would be a statement about reclaiming our shared space and reminding Karen that no one is above the community's rules, especially not her. With my plan in mind, I quickly set to work orchestrating my geese strategy. First, I needed to find the perfect gaggle, the resident geese that often made their home by the nearby park. They were notorious for their loud honking and chaotic antics, making them the ideal agents of mayhem for Karen's party. I enlisted the help of my neighbor, Mark, who had a knack for animal wrangling. Over a cup of coffee, I laid out my scheme, and he chuckled at the thought of turning the tables on our neighborhood's self-appointed enforcer. Together, we hatched a plan to lure the geese with stale bread, an irresistible treat for our feathered friends. The next day, armed with a bag of breadcrumbs and a sense of mischief, we crept toward the park. As we scattered pieces along the path leading to the lake, we watched in delight as the geese waddled toward us, honking excitedly. Little did they know they were about to become key players in my master plan. Once our feathered allies were assembled, we led them toward the lake with careful precision. The anticipation built as we approached Karen's party. Just as her guests were laughing and splashing in the water, we released the gaggle. It was chaos. The geese charged forward with their characteristic enthusiasm, honking loudly as they invaded the scene. In that moment, I couldn't help but laugh at the sight, partygoers scrambling in all directions while Karen stood frozen in disbelief. My heart raced with excitement at witnessing my plan unfold so perfectly. It was satisfying to see her confronted by the very spirit of nature she had overlooked. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming our shared space and reminding everyone that sometimes nature has a way of enforcing its own rules. As the gaggle of geese charged onto the scene, a wave of confusion swept over Karen's swimming party. The laughter and splashing came to an abrupt halt as the honking filled the air, echoing off the water like a wild symphony. Guests turned their heads in unison, eyes wide with disbelief as they processed what was happening. Karen, who had been mid-sentence explaining her latest HOA initiative, suddenly found herself face-to-face with a flock of geese waddling straight toward her. Her expression shifted from surprise to panic in an instant. "Oh no, not the geese!" she shrieked, her voice rising above the cacophony. She waved her arms frantically, trying to shoo them away as if her gestures could somehow command nature itself to retreat. The geese, undeterred by her antics, continued their advance, honking loudly and flapping their wings with gleeful abandon. Partygoers began to scatter, some jumping out of the water while others stumbled over inflatable rafts as they tried to escape the feathery invasion. Laughter quickly turned to shrieks and yelps as guests sought refuge on towels and picnic tables, creating a scene straight out of a slapstick comedy. In the midst of the chaos, I stood hidden behind a nearby tree, barely containing my laughter. It was a delightful spectacle. Karen's carefully orchestrated gathering had unraveled into disarray thanks to my feathered accomplices. As I watched her futilely attempt to regain control of her party, I felt a mix of satisfaction and amusement. This was more than just a prank. It was a vivid reminder that sometimes nature has its own way of asserting boundaries, and today, it was doing so with flair. In the aftermath of the chaotic scene at the lake, the air was thick with tension and disbelief. As the dust settled and the geese meandered back toward their usual haunts, the partygoers slowly began to regain their composure. Karen, however, was a different story. Once a figure of authority, she now stood bewildered and flustered, desperately trying to piece together what had just happened. Her pristine reputation as the neighborhood enforcer was in tatters, and she knew it. Word of the incident spread like wildfire throughout the community. Neighbors who had once feared her found themselves laughing about the debacle over backyard fences and during school pickups. Some even praised my creative retaliation, exchanging knowing glances and smirks whenever Karen passed by. It was a remarkable shift in dynamics. Suddenly, residents felt emboldened to express playful dissent against the stringent rules that had become synonymous with her leadership. Meanwhile, the HOA couldn't ignore the incident any longer. A meeting was hastily called to discuss what had transpired. Karen arrived red-faced and defensive, attempting to downplay her role in inviting chaos to our beloved lake. The board members exchanged glances, some stifling laughter while others struggled to maintain a facade of seriousness. In a surprising turn, they decided to address the incident with humor rather than punishment, a welcome change in approach. Through this unexpected series of events, I reflected on how easily community boundaries can blur under pressure. What began as a personal vendetta had transformed into a collective reckoning about freedom and respect within our neighborhood. Perhaps this chaos would lead to a new understanding that even Karen needed reminding. Rules should enhance our lives, not dictate them. As the dust settled in the aftermath of the Goose invasion, I found myself reflecting on the unexpected outcome of that chaotic day. The incident had become a turning point for our community, a reminder that even in a tightly regulated neighborhood, there was room for humor and camaraderie. With Karen's reputation shaken, the balance of power shifted. Neighbors who had once felt intimidated by her now shared stories of the geese with laughter and joy, forging connections in ways they hadn't before. This newfound sense of unity seemed to encourage open discussions about the need for boundaries, both personal and communal. People began to voice their opinions more freely, advocating for a healthier dialogue about the HOA's rules and regulations. What had once felt like an oppressive regime now seemed more like a collaborative effort to maintain our cherished space. It was as if the geese had not only disrupted a party but also disrupted an outdated status quo. Karen, too, appeared to be reevaluating her approach. No longer did she strut around with her clipboard, ready to pounce at any infraction. Instead, she began to engage in conversations with neighbors, seeking their input rather than enforcing rules from a pedestal. This shift allowed for a greater appreciation of individual freedoms while still respecting shared spaces. In many ways, unleashing the geese had brought about an unexpected harmony within our community. It was a gentle reminder that while rules are important, they should exist to foster connection rather than create division. As I looked around at my neighbors laughing together again by the lake, I felt hopeful that we were on a path toward a more respectful and joyful coexistence. In the days following the Geese incident, a surprising sense of humor emerged from the chaos. What had initially felt like a tense confrontation between Karen and the partygoers transformed into a shared joke that everyone could laugh about. Neighbors began to reference the Great Goose Incident in casual conversations, each retelling adding new layers of exaggerated hilarity. From claims of heroic goose wrangling to mock tales of Karen devising a goose control plan, the community found joy in the absurdity of it all. The laughter became a balm for past grievances, bridging gaps that had formed among residents. Barbecues and impromptu gatherings sprouted up as neighbors sought to relive the event or simply bond over their shared amusement. Children would waddle around pretending to be geese, while adults exchanged memes and playful jabs about future parties, jokingly warning each other to keep an eye out for any feathered intruders. This lightheartedness helped foster connections that transcended prior divisions caused by Karen's strict enforcement of HOA rules. Though some skeptics worried that the incident might deepen existing tensions with Karen, the opposite occurred. Instead of reinforcing her authority, it humanized her. Residents began to see her as more than just a rule enforcer. She became part of the neighborhood's tapestry, flawed but relatable. In many ways, the chaos had created an opportunity for laughter and camaraderie, reminding us all that sometimes humor is the best way to navigate conflicts. As I watched families gather by the lake again, this time without fear of reprimand, I felt grateful for the unexpected path this incident had carved. We were learning to embrace imperfections together, finding harmony and laughter amidst the quirks of community living. As I reflect on the whirlwind of events that unfolded, I find myself contemplating the nature of community living. It's a unique tapestry woven from diverse personalities, values, and shared spaces. Living in a neighborhood means navigating the delicate balance between individual freedoms and collective responsibilities. The private lake, once a source of tension, has transformed into a symbol of unity and resilience. The incident with Karen and the geese highlighted an essential truth. While rules are necessary for maintaining order, they should not stifle the spirit of community. It's vital to respect shared spaces, not only for their physical boundaries but also for the connections they foster among us. When we choose to honor those spaces, we create an environment where everyone feels valued and heard. At times, however, protecting our peace can lead us to unexpected lengths. My decision to unleash the geese was impulsive yet deeply rooted in a desire to reclaim my sanctuary. It served as a reminder that when our boundaries are crossed, we must find ways to assert ourselves, sometimes with humor and creativity rather than confrontation. In the end, this experience reinforced that communities thrive on understanding and compromise. We learned that it's okay to challenge authority when it becomes overbearing, and that laughter can heal even the deepest divides. As I watch my neighbors enjoy the lake again, free from fear and filled with joy, I feel hopeful about our future together. It's a testament to the idea that while we may clash at times, it's our shared humanity that ultimately brings us back together, fostering a sense of belonging that enriches us all.